Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. My name is Paul Thomas. There is an electoral paradox that deserves analysis. Back when Roe was overturned by Dobbs, Republicans in Kansas, Marianne alluded to earlier, immediately tried to change their state constitution by initiating a referendum where the voters could declare abortion unconstitutional. By an overwhelming margin, the voters in Kansas decided that women's reproductive rights were maintained. Next, Republicans tried the same thing in Kentucky, Vermont, and Michigan. Voters again said no. Abortion rights were front and center in Wisconsin's Supreme Court election, and again, voters elected by 11 points the candidate who vowed to protect the woman's right to choose. Since Dobbs, 16 Republican state legislatures have passed laws restricting abortions. By Planned Parenthood's count, 30 out of 50 states now have restrictions or outright bans. Republicans in these state houses do not seem to care what voters think overall because the vast majority of these incumbents are reelected without any opposition. We can thank the Koch brothers for their decades-long effort to create the infrastructure that gave these Republicans the arrogance of this security. We can complain all day about how these politicians are contrary to the voters on issues such as gun violence, police reform, reproductive health care, the preservation of democracy. But dark money, gerrymandering, and the inability to recruit oppositional candidates gives them no reason for concern. Are we stuck with this? Is there any strategy we can employ to turn this around? Mary Lee, you talked earlier about the voting thing, but it seems that these elections show, primarily the referendums, that the people are dead set against what's going on, yet we have these state legislatures that feel very confident in passing these restrictive abortion laws.
They do, and I do think they're going to pay their price.
Okay.
I mean, this is a classic example. The American people are not behind they're not behind even book banning. They're not behind any of this stuff. As a general rule, I think the immigrant policy has probably that bigotry has probably taken some substantial root across the nation. It's really misguided. It's not full of facts. It's, just which is very unfortunate. I think that's one of the biggest avenues they've taken hold of that gets Republicans votes. But beyond that, at this juncture, I mean, you've already heard GOP supporters pulling their money from both Trump and DeSantis because they keep running down these paths where they want to restrict individual rights. So we were able to produce the vote.
So let me ask,
we can do it again.
This, because their attitude now is we're going to go ahead and pass all these restrictive laws. Mm-hmm. How many election cycles do you think it's going to take for them to get the message?
I think the next presidential one.
Oh, really?
Look, they lost the Senate already, did they not, last year? And, and I think if we learn how to play we just need to play a short game, not necessarily a long game right now. But, if we can get it all back in 2024, you got to believe and you got to work for it.
Yeah. To your point there, this recent Supreme Court ruling is 5-4 decision overturning Alabama's gerrymandering is supposed to have an effect in Texas, Louisiana, and some other state. And there's already been predicting 4 to 8 seats are automatically going to turn blue based on the fact that they this ruling by the Supreme Court. Okay, Marianne, how many election cycles do you think it's going to take for these knuckleheads to get the idea that they're on the losing side of history here?
I guess a lot depends on what happens in 24.
Which is what Mary Lee just said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's optimistic. But the ruling on Alabama, uh, going to have effects on Florida and Texas. That's a good thing. If we can get blue seats, or good representation. I don't know, I'd say another cycle or two to turn things around. I lean more towards, two more elections at least. I mean, this stuff didn't just happen overnight.
Dan, every time I talk to you about your particular congressman in the congressional seat in the district that you reside in, you keep telling me the same thing, that they'll never be able to beat, ever going to be able to beat Kelly out of that seat. And every time I say, "Oh yeah, well, yeah," then you end up being right. They can't beat Kelly. So Mary Lee feels that by 2024, these guys are going to learn their lesson. What do you think it's going to take?
I don't think they're actually going. I don't think they're going to learn that particular lesson. I think that there are some lessons that are going to be learned. And I don't want to confuse the crazy loud ones with the smart evil ones. What we saw this past election cycle was a lot of the really outrageous, crazy ones who were trying in competitive seats. Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania. Like, I don't particularly like John Fetterman, but I know Dr. Oz is a con man. So I had to not vote for Dr. Oz. Carrie Lake is obviously insane in Arizona and still thinks that she won. And it's not like Trump, where pretending that he won, she legitimately believes that she won. So those people were too outrageous and they lost. Lauren Boebert came very close to losing, and I do believe that she is very vulnerable in the next election cycle. But there's always going to be the Marjorie Taylor Greens who have unassailable districts, and the only one who's going to beat them is going to be a primary challenger. And I don't know if those people in her Georgia district just think that she's doing a good job or what, but no Democrat there is going to be able to beat her. The district is too gerrymandered. It's always going to be Republican. If you want to beat her, give her primary opponents money. I don't think she's had primary opponents last two times.
Yeah, I don't think she's going to
But
get any this time either.
yeah, so yeah, we're stuck with her. We're stuck with Mike Kelly. So the lesson that they will learn is smarter candidates who aren't quite so vocally crazy are far more dangerous than the Carrie Lakes and Mehmet Oz's. So if you like, I feel like DeSantis is significantly more dangerous to the country than Donald Trump is, because he actually has an understanding of what the job entails. He's going to be absolutely, assuming he ever ascends to the presidency, he's going to be completely evil and do all the horrible things he did in Florida that are just actively trying to hurt people. But he'll know how to effectively get it done. You don't have to take the time to explain that to him, whereas they had to take the time to explain how to do things to Trump, and that delay gave us openings.
Yeah, Trump disagreed with all those things anyway.
Yeah. So I also find that we're locked in a cycle right now where every single election is existential. So I understand the frustration of people who are tired of the two-party system and don't like the idea of the establishment because they feel left behind. Believe me, I get it. A lot of those people are just fucking idiots on both sides. There are leftist idiots and there are conservative idiots, but you know that if you don't fall in line behind the person that your side has chosen, you know that that person is going to lose. And then you see what else happens. So, and we saw that in 2016, and I think we learned that lesson for 2020.
Mhm.
But in 2024, I hear enough rumblings that I am not convinced we've remembered that lesson.
Yeah, it's still scary. In a recent discussion on historical reflections, I brought up the trend that most poor, white, uneducated rural voters have drifted away from the Democratic Party and have become registered Republicans, even though allegiance with corporate interests has resulted in Republican policies that have clearly hurt the poor whites as well as persons of color. My view is that the poor rural whites see that their position as being superior to blacks is embraced by Republicans more than Democrats. And that is the biggest reason they tend to vote against their economic interests. If that is not the case, please explain what it is. Dan, why do you think they continue to vote against their economic interests if it's not because they want to be better than the black and other people of color?
Well, they do want to be better than the black. They do want to be better than all the people of color. They want to be better than the gay. They want to be better than the trans. They want to be better than the Muslim. Like they want to be the superior, and they do feel power shifting away from the straight white male electorate. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and I brought this up during the QAnon discussion too, if you believe, you need to stop that right now. If you believe that your opponent is actively human trafficking and the reason that they like abortion is to make sure that there's fresh fetuses to harvest so that they can drink their morning glass of adrenochrome, and that we ran someone who actively eats babies, like live babies on a plate. Hillary just chops them up. Then, of course, you're going to vote for whoever is not that active monster. And I believe that it's so ingrained in a lot of rural white Americans' identities that that's just the sort of thing Democrats do. Like, I think an attorney general very recently at some fundraising dinner made a comment that he wanted to put Democrats on the endangered species list. And yeah, like that's literally talking about hunting us down,
So
getting
you
rid of
think
us.
it's their susceptibility to believe in lies?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I'm not saying that I'm not gullible about certain things. I am in like I firmly believe that Trump's P tape exists just because I want it to.
Yeah, me
I
too. And
don't know for
I think that's what really Putin had on him the whole time. But anyway, that's another way off topic. So, Marianne, race? Do you think race is the reason why um, poor rural whites vote against their economic interests? Or, like Dan says, in addition to race, it's also their just willingness to believe in lies.
I agree with Dan. I can't expound on that. I agree with him.
You agree with it that they're willing to believe the
To be
lies that are being told.
I believe that all politicians lie, and they swallow it hook, line, and sinker.
Okay. Marilee, race or belief in lies? Which is the biggest reason in your mind why these white people, poor white people, want to vote against their economic interests?
I think that that has actually been a pretty common thread, and I think it's because I think they see the Republican Party as a wealthy party, and they kind of elevates them to vote for them. I never thought it so much as racism, but now that you put it out there, and I think of the immigrant policy and how they can rant and rave about African Americans and Mexicans, I have to agree it's very, very racist. With respect to the lies, that's so much more recent, don't you think? With Fox News and not having to be honest and truthful anymore when I forget the law that they passed. Um, and so now, yeah, the lying, the QAnon, all that stuff is just too fantastical for me to wrap my head around. But
And the
it's a
fact
voting
that
block.
Trump can't open his mouth without lying. You know, you look at
And yet,
the picture,
and yet they follow him off the
the
cliff.
picture of
So
his wife. That's his wife. Oh, that's blurry now. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Is the desire for superiority over others a factor, or the main result we are so close to becoming Gilead in 2023? The above mentioned states are already there. The entire South, from the Carolinas to Texas, have passed laws banning abortions with criminal implications for women and doctors involved in medical care that does not result in a live baby being born. I've been hearing many pundits say that it is an obsession for control and exercising power. I think it's about sex and a perverted jealousy of others having sex for pleasure without the consequences of pain and suffering. What do you think motivates these a-holes? Is it difficult to imagine that they really care about the quality of life? I just think they're sick, and the sickness has a lot to do with their ridiculous sexual identity that makes them so afraid of gays and transgendered and women who want to control their bodies. Marilee, what's your view on that?
Hey, for some reason I missed this question, but let me get caught up here. Uh, as a society, we're probably pretty repressed sexually. I think, most religions repress it, and uh, you're probably onto something, but my personal opinion, everything I've experienced in the workforce as a woman, living in different places in the country, I really just believe it's the need for superiority over
Mm-hmm.
and over and over again. I think that's anytime you can one up somebody and feel better about yourself. It's
Women,
human.
women be in a class that they can be superior over.
For some reason, I mean, it's been going on for centuries and we have risen above it. But yeah, right now when we rise, things start to happen like gun control. So we have to be put back in our place. The people you need to worry about are the women that acquiesce to this, the women that consider that norm. That that frightens me more than anything. That they'd rather suppress their dreams than give their kids dreams. It's just unconscionable how people behave. But um, I don't, I think it's more about that than I do the total sexual repression issue that this country has.
Okay, Marianne, suppressed sexuality or just wanting to be better than anybody else? What do
That's
you
all,
think is?
it's all about control. And that ties in with the sexual repression, sexual jealousy, but control more than anything. Dictating how people should live their lives, what they should do with their bodies. It's a control issue.
Okay, Dan, any sexual thinking going into what their decisions are, or is like what Marianne says, just all about control?
Well, as a gay man, I can tell you most Republican legislators think about gay sex a lot more than I do. Um, so obviously,
you think about it a lot.
Good one.
Yes, I'm relatively young, so yes, I do. But yeah, these people have just, please stop. I'm sunburned. Please stop. The attitude is very much, yeah, it is control, but there's a very specific repressed sexual dichotomy going on there. Like, we know that they've anointed Trump as their god, and we know he's into weird shit because he's been in the public eye for quite a long time, and we've watched his marriages roll around. And yeah, that's not a normal sexual behavior. He's just randomly having sex with porn stars and sexually assaulting women in dressing rooms. So they definitely feel like they want to be superior over women in the same way that he is. Um, but women have started fighting back and they don't like that. Like, just listening to the average straight 40 something man describe things of the last few years, like, you need to get down now. Like the Me Too movement, like, oh, we're afraid to talk with women. Like, you should not be. You should be perfectly comfortable talking to women, but you have to respect women because women will now tell you no. And if you touch them without their express consent, yeah, they're going to sue you, as they should.
Absolutely.
Like, but the reason that everybody gets so up in arms about, oh, well, we can't be like we were in the good old days. Everything you were doing in the good old days was hurting someone, and the people you were hurting are telling you not to hurt them anymore. So I think that's really the crux of their issue. Like, I want to be able to do all of these things and not care about how other people took it because it was always funny to me. Well, it's not funny to everybody else, and everybody else has finally got they have the agency now to say something, whereas before they didn't.
Yeah, I'm with Dan on this. I think suppressed sexuality has more to do with it than anything else. Okay, I saved this last question, this most controversial question for last. So bear with me as I get through it. Our republic has always been governed by the two-party system. We started with the Federalists and the Democrats/Republicans, who later dropped the Republican part and became known as the Democrats. That is the party of Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson. After two presidents, the Federalists were gone, replaced by the Whigs. When the Whigs fell apart in the middle of the 19th century, the two parties were the Democrats and the Republicans. Today, all the danger we face from women's health, gun violence, climate change, wealth inequality, corporate welfare, racism, sedition, misinformation, religious intolerance, voter suppression, gender discrimination, refusal to pay our debts, criminally corrupt behavior of justices, lack of daycare support, mass incarceration, workplace injustice, misogyny, etc., is embodied in the policy agenda of the Republican Party. I see one solution to the prevention of a descent into the nation of Gilead. The voters of America need to do to the Republican Party what the voters did to the Federalists and the Whigs. Make it extinct. If you know another way to save ourselves that doesn't involve the total destruction of the Republican Party, tell me what it is. You look at the behavior of Ron DeSantis, of Kevin McCarthy, of Ted Cruz. These are people that represent the Republican Party, and all of that is against all the things that I mentioned there. Dan, I don't see any other way to get it past this than to have the Republicans no longer be one of the two in the two-party system. What do you think?
Well, I think there's always going to be a conservative party, and the party alignment switches. Like, the Democrats used to be a conservative party, and now they're the liberal or progressive party. I don't
But it's
think.
more than that now with the Republicans. They're the party of Trump. The Republicans have become a cult following. Even though he's about to go to jail, they still have him as their main guy. So they don't their legitimacy, I think, is no longer something that we can honor.
Yes, but people still have the right to run for office as a Republican, and people still have the right to vote for those people. So no, I don't consider Trump to be a legitimate president. I don't consider Marjorie Taylor Greene to be a legitimate human being. And yet here we are. So there's something with, if this particular party does not make it, and they've had a pretty good run, but if they are to fall apart, something needs to replace them. And I don't see that happening soon. And the reason that I don't see that happening soon is because while there are other conservative political parties, just like there are other liberal political parties, nobody runs and wins anything in those. Like I looked up when 2016, there was Jill Stein, and her conservative libertarian counterpart was he looked like he got kicked in the head by a pony, or at least that's how he talked.
Gary something.
Yeah,
Gary.
yeah. The man was clearly an idiot, absolutely unfit for anything. Couldn't believe that a political party had actually put him up. I could see the Greens putting up Jill Stein. They're kind of overly crunchy, and the things that made her unable to function in society were benefits to them rather than hindrances. So I could see her, but that man was clearly brain damaged. So I looked up libertarians who had won things, and every libertarian who held any kind of statewide office in the whole country had done so as a member of the Republican Party. Any libertarians who had held office as libertarians were Republicans and then switched after they won their election. So yeah, like they have a few dog catchers and a couple city councilmen. That's it. And they're the second biggest conservative party. So I don't see the Republicans going anywhere, because nor do I see the Democrats going anywhere, because there's no one to replace them yet. Like Kristen Sinema, when she left the Democratic Party, became an independent rather than join the Greens or anybody else. I mean, she's garbage. She's absolute hot garbage, and nobody else wants her. But there's nobody to take their place. Bernie Sanders, darling of the left, is not a Democrat. He becomes a Democrat to run in our presidential primaries. When he loses, he goes back to being an independent. So yeah, he's got no interest in being a Green or anything else. I don't see there being a viable alternative to the Republicans. So the Republicans are what's going to be around unless somebody else organizes and rises to take their place. I don't see that happening. I don't see the donors switching to anybody else because the Republican apparatus is already there for them.
Marianne, Dan doesn't see the Republicans going anywhere because there's nothing to replace them. But we had the Federalists replaced by the Whigs, and we had the Whigs replaced by the Republicans. I don't know. I just think that we're in such a dire situation now that unless we do something to rid ourselves of this toxic poison that the Republican Party has become, that we're going to become Gilead. So what do you think?
It's depressing. But I don't think there's a quick fix. It's going to take a while to turn things around. And I think that the electorate, it's the women and the men that realize how crazy all this is. They're going to have to start a new party, and it's going to take time.
So you see that happening? Someone starting a new party?
I see that happening. I see the independent party getting stronger, or whatever the name of the party is. There'll be another party, and it'll grow in number. You know, like the Tea Party. It was pretty strong there for a while. I think something, though, a decent party will overtake the Republican Party, but it's not going to happen overnight. It may take a few elections. You know, it could take 10 years, 12 years. We're just going to have to see what happens.
Marilee, you said that the Republicans are going to realize in 2024 the mistakes that they're making. But what I'd like to see is go through a few more cycles, maybe get into 2030s and see the Republicans lose enough that they're gone, just like the the Whigs and the Federalists. How do you see the future unfolding?
That is exactly how I see it. I think they continue to dig this hole, and large donors won't give to these people with their crazy ideas that aren't supported by the American people because they cannot win the major national elections. And what's I don't know that the Republican Party is going to be eliminated, but I think they'll go back to square one and rebuild themselves. It's like, everybody has had to do, whether you call yourself one thing or the other, it doesn't matter. You rebuild when you continue to lose, when the electorate has no faith in you, when the electorate isn't on your side, then that's what you have to do. And I personally, I'm at this stage where why can't we all be independent? Why do we have to have these party battles? It's they serve no purpose at the end of the day. We're just eating our young half the time.
Yeah, right.
But if from my mouth to God's ears, yeah, I'd love to see the Republican Party just vanish. I mean, it's just been horrible what we've had to endure, what innocent people have had to endure these so many years with their cruelties. But I see it more as a rebuilding effort.
Well,
So
I
as
I don't
to
I don't
reach
mind.
out to the big money.
Yeah, I don't mind if they keep the same name, but they can't be doing the same thing.
No,
And if they make a
before were
conscious,
better people, you
yeah,
know.
if they
Yeah,
make a conscious effort to do something different like they used to be, I'd be fine with that.
yeah. I mean, then it was just policy. It wasn't all about how you live your life. Back then, we had policy differences,
Yeah, right.
and
Right.
and that's something you can have a face-to-face discussion on without being feeling like your life is threatened. Now, it's just off the rails with all this crazy judgments and dictates. So I'm hoping for better things, obviously.
Well, you're
I
you're more
remain
optimistic
optimistic.
than me with your 2024 prediction. I'm thinking we have to go well into the
Well,
2030s.
we all have to work for that 2024. I mean, it's
Oh
not
yeah,
handed to
we
us.
can't give up on 2024. How about that?
No, we cannot.
Panel, thank you so much for joining us in this great discussion about where we are and where we're headed. And all you out there in cyberland, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.